Okay, working on the snow utility stuff. Um, there were some things that I was thinking about that I should probably address to get the behavior correct before I start figuring out the blending stuff. And that's how to do this, like these edges where the snow kind of reaches the slope threshold where it can't stick to itself anymore and it starts kind of falling off, these little chunks. So I think I need to set up a little bit better test scene, um, for lack of a better term for that, so I can make sure that the edge behavior is correct, and then it should just work with whatever input I give it. So I think we're going to do that just in this node. This node. Okay. We're not going to do it there. We'll do it out here. Okay. So just a good example shape is kind of the square shape. It's a really hard fall off. And then I'll try with probably a disc. And then we'll see if that works. Just going to kind of make this, give it a little bit of distance so it has a little something to hang on to. Otherwise, the height map preview is going to look really bad. This is our height map. Make our own map. And this normal map. Just looking at the angles, like the value that's in there. Just so we're dealing with something similar. I'll crank this up a little bit. And I just need it like a test color for it, which will basically be flat. But then the roughness, metalness stuff doesn't really matter, but it's all pretty rough. Okay, so base color, normal, roughness. We'll just leave that because it's black. Height, AO. Is pretty far away. Just the radius a little bit. Wait. AO. Occlusion. Oh, didn't put it in the material group. There you go. Okay. So now I have a snow covering over this thing, this rectangle. So what we're going to try to do is, this. Right, how can we get this kind of chunky fall-offness in this distance? So if you look at it, here's the edge of the, I guess this is a bench or lantern or something like that. So here's the edge, and the snow, if we ignore the fact that it billows out, which is going to be really difficult to do without vector displacement. So we're just going to kind of ignore the billowiness. But it goes up, and then it kind of cuts over inside of it a little bit. So here, this is kind of well inside the edge, the silhouette of it. And that seems pretty, yikes. Pretty similar on most of the objects. There's kind of the stickiness that happens, and then it rounds over. So it's kind of the straight, erode-y bit, and then rounding over into like kind of the core of that shape. Let's see what we can do about that. So bring the snow level all the way down. Everything's covered in snow, but we don't have any like edge here. And that's because of this histogram scan, which we could give a new float. Okay. So that's kind of more correct. So if we look at the reference here, we have this shadow, where this snow is kind of doing the same thing as it tries to fall down to the ground level. So from the top, right, we kind of have this shape, and then the snow is falling past that shape on the camera. So we have kind of our base ground, and then this plane that's happening on the edge of the shape, where this is blocked by the thing above it. So this is kind of catching the snow, and then this one down here is kind of catching the snow. So we have this like double shape, which in the 3D view here, you can kind of see that double shape, where we have this shadow and then this bit here. So we need to make sure that we have kind of proper roundness to it, which, because the contrast is super high, we don't have that. And then we also have blur happening. So this was a step that I skipped that I really shouldn't have when I was kind of setting up the tuning. Honk! Welcome! When I was setting up the tuning of how like the snow kind of just builds up on the surface, I skipped setting up this functionality, which means that as the snow builds up, it doesn't create that kind of round shape that you would expect. And then eventually these shapes kind of blend into each other as the snow gets high enough that it's no longer in the shadow, it's touching the bottom of the surface. And that's what I kind of did, but I skipped the rounding. That's pretty important, in my opinion, to help make the snow look good. This is kind of increasing that snow shadowy shape. Just pulling it back from this edge a lot. Have you been working on anything cool, Punk? Anything you're excited about? Excited to be learning? Ooh, I think I'm going to kind of keep this, but then just stick another one in so I don't mess with this one too much. So raise. Okay. So now we have that roundy shape. It's falling off on both sides. Yeah, that's what we want. We're going to give ourselves a little bit more room here. What is this for? Testing? Okay. I feel like I haven't done anything cool recently either. But at least fun. I've done some fun things recently. Learning a little bit about image recognition stuff and looking at creating a texture library searching thing that allows you to kind of do like a Google reverse image search on an input that you give it. So you could give it like a picture of the ground, and then it will give you a list of similar ground textures that are in your library. Mostly for work, but I think just about anybody could benefit from it, especially if you've used all your source credits. So, not really cool, especially if you're trying to tell somebody about doing like image histogram blocking. People are like, okay. So I'm going to try to use a slope blur to create those little chunks on the side. And then at work, we're not really doing new things. It's about finishing, making sure that we deliver at the quality level that is expected. So you're not really going to make new cool stuff. It's about making stuff better. So that's doing something kind of interesting. not exactly what I want because it's not limiting it kind of to the middle. Or rather, it's not eliminating it from the middle. It's breaking up the edges. That's kind of hard to tell. I feel like I should change my diffuse value on this. Where's that happening here? Goes into this blend. Just lower the lightness a little bit. And the saturation. So we're working more with like a clay. Yeah, this crowd would probably find image recognition search to be cool. My wife doesn't really find that interesting. She just smiles and nods. Yeah, yeah. Oh, huh. Which I appreciate. It's almost like... So I want it to be on these edges, but not on the rest of the snow. Which means I kind of need a histogram select to try to grab just that value range. And I need to use an auto levels. Otherwise, the value range selection is going to be difficult as this changes. Like as I select more, those edges won't be the same. And eventually they'll converge, which is exactly what I want, but so it's more like this goes on the multiply. So that's not exactly what I want. We don't want like this carved edge. Value range selector. So we don't want the area that's totally black. But we can try it. Okay, so Max will prevent those edges for the most part. And this is getting to be a mess. Okay, so then here we need to reblend it with this, set to lighten. That helps. Like, I like the shape that's happening, we just need to find a way to control which edge it's on. Okay, so we're doing a bunch of double masking essentially by changing the blur. So if we just say, you know what, blur everything, doesn't matter, we'll mask it back in after the fact by doing this. I probably need the auto levels version. Okay, that's interesting. Change the size a little bit. What one? Okay. I'm gonna lower this a little bit. And then our AOs aren't really doing us any favors. Okay, it's a little bit easier to read now. Okay, so I don't like that that edge is as straight as it is. We kind of have the same issue on this one. It doesn't bend over as much as I would like. So it's not the blur, it's this like remasking. Looks like previous height, new height. I mean, it's the blur. Then I can increase the tightness of that edge with this contrast if I want. Okay. Okay, so you can kind of see that the clouds, this like cloudy shape isn't exactly working. We might need to not use clouds too. Let's use the same one. Might need to do an operation to it first. It's about the same. So we're going to try slope blur at cloak blur. Slope blur. See if we can change these shapes up a little bit. And it could be that we don't use slope blur here, that instead we do something like this. And then do multiply. And then we'd need to invert these. Some interesting things happening. Exactly what we want, because we need like yeah, not that. So one of the things that's nice is we kind of have like more of that shape of the kind of cascading bits. Slope blur plus node. Oh yeah. It sounds super useful. I'm surprised I haven't done that. That sounds like exactly what I would need for some of the stylized stuff that I really enjoy doing. Such a good idea. Outputting a mask. And then a noise and depth control. So you could hit the high areas or low areas or both. These shapes just aren't quite correct. Ooh. So I'm just playing around basically. Like, what do I have? How can I use it? Which is a lot of what designer is. It's just like playing with the values. The more you know about what the values do, the easier it is to play in a predictable way, as opposed to just goofing around and see if you have a happy accident happen. So what I was looking at is I kind of like these shapes. I kind of like how they feel like they're falling in. So I was messing with basically how much contrast is in this and how much noise is in this fractal sum base. Global opacity is basically the contrast. If I lower this, there's less contrast in here. It's generally a lower value. And then roughness is like blur, I guess. And then max level is like how high the brights are, or the number of, I guess, fractal steps. And then I looked at it and I was like, okay, so that fall off angle is too steep. So then I tightened it up. So now what we have is, I think, a noise that works pretty well, but it's way too even. It's like consistent all the way across. That's not exactly what we have in the reference, right? We have like this shape, and then we have kind of this section of relatively smooth, and then we have this big chunk that's fallen and then kind of smooth, and then we have this shape. So we need another layer of kind of macro noise to it. Perfect. One thing that we are missing that is pretty important is the rounding of the shape. So this is pretty square, but this shape is pretty round. So I wonder if what we should be using is more of a non-uniform blur. It's like blur the height map a little bit and then use it as a non-uniform blur. Actually, we probably don't really care about the quality because we're going to blur it again. It's better. So we have the nice kind of squareness down here, but then the roundness up here. Yeah, slope blur. Let's see. 0.7. 0.75. When you bring the slope blur in, 10. Yeah, I don't know if I ever use slope blur above 5. 10 is way too high. Yeah, exactly. It's almost always below 1. And I can't think of, like, I was doing like a shattered cement material, and I think I generated some of my base shattering shapes with a really high. It's like if you do something like that. But yeah, pretty much never above 1. This has a cool organicness to it. Winbot. Club. Just do it. Can't type today. This kind of has like a weird fleshed look to it. Like a wavy sand. And here we're using like high values. Anyway, but yeah, for like chipping or edge damage, stuff like that, you're never going with a super high value. It's so silly. Okay, so the shape that's happening here is pretty good. There's kind of a weird edge. I don't know how I feel about that. Because we're using this mask that goes pretty dark. So now we have like the kind of collapsy shapes, like the large collapse shapes. But we need the kind of micro clumpy shapes. So we might be able to do that all as part of this. We blend in another. Maybe we'll be able to use our clouds here. Clouds 3. Might have to blur it. No, we probably want add. When I'm tweaking numbers, I generally try to like double or halve them, because it gives you enough change that you can kind of notice what's happening. So, for example, I think, oh, it should be less than 0.25. So I go, okay, it should be less, and I do 0.24. Okay, it's 0.23. Okay. And so then I keep dropping it, and it doesn't help me hone in on that fineness. So by going to 0.125, which is half, I can see, okay, that changed it in a good way. And I could go half again, and then see, oh, went too far. So then I could go somewhere in between, like, and then that helps me get to my final goal aesthetically a little bit more quickly, because I'm not just slowly changing this. I'm trying to remember that. Oh yeah, shift. If you hold shift, then it doesn't move as quickly, or it doesn't say like as attached to your mouse. Yeah, so it's just a useful tip. I don't think there's any downside to working that way. Because what's nice about doing like half numbers, so one, you're going to get better at fractions. But two is that you'll kind of never get to zero. Well, when working between 0 and 1, 0.5, 0.25, 0.125, 0.0625, you're never going to like kind of get to that zero level. It allows you to get to your values quicker. And like when changing a light intensity, just double it. See if that's too far, and then you know that you're going to meet somewhere in between. And then let's say you go from 1 to 2 to 4, and you're like, oh, okay, it's somewhere between 2 and 4, so you can do 3. And then, okay, it's somewhere between 2 and 3, then you can do your 2.5. Okay, 2.5, 3, okay, somewhere in between 2.5 and 3, 2.75, and as you keep splitting that difference, it allows you to get to your final a lot faster. Because if you're just upping it by 0.1 every time, then it's a lot more tedious. Okay, so this is good, and I'm going to up my scale, see how it feels when it stretches. Okay, I'll change this value back up. Actually, let's delete that. Whoop. The tricky thing too is that we're using like height, so this has this profile which we're trying to get. We kind of have this evenness that kind of bulges out. These stair-steppiness pieces are actually three-dimensional, but we can't really do the cut back in. So like this lump sticks out, it kind of comes back in, and then another lump sticks out. But with this, it's 2D, so really you're only working with like the shape out, kind of angling down, straight out, angling down, straight out, angling down. Which is just a limitation of working in kind of a 2D environment. And now that I look at it a little bit more, so I went from 20 to 10, and it's somewhere between 20 and 10, so then I went to 15. Looking at how those shapes change. How like lumpy that is. I think I like that a little bit better. Now I have these kind of larger macro shapes, these medium shapes, and then these finer shapes. Okay, save. Living dangerous. I think that's the first time I've saved since I started. Don't do that. Don't work that long without saving. It's always a bad idea. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of organization, and then we'll get to figuring out how to do this over time. Getting proper snow accumulation with those edges draping where that they should. This is our old one. I'm going to keep that for now. Okay. So we have our base snow definition. We don't need this. So instead what we do is we do a blur on the height map. And then run that in, do a blur so that we can get the nice drop off here, and then the roundness, the upper shape, and then kind of have all this masky stuff that's happening out here. This isn't at all related to the normal map. So we're going to pull that out of the way. Just kind of base stuff. The node, this new thing that they're adding. Oh, so excited for that. So that AO that we're generating here is uber intense. If we're doing subsurfaciness, we might use that to help in this area, but we'll do something like that. Feels a little bit better. All right. Okay. So, yeah. Gosh, organizing graphs. Like, especially if you're working on a team where somebody else is going to come and look at your graph, being able to have a single node that like all this stuff connects to that I could pull into place, or maybe a few of them that I can pull into place so there's less spaghettiing going on. Time is so valuable, and having to spend 10 minutes to figure out what the heck you did the last time you worked on it, or what one of your colleagues was thinking when they worked on it, is so important to minimize that time. Like this, I should switch my height in AO, I guess, but their kind of standard order is this. So whatever reason their material transform node is switched. So I'm just going to leave this cross, though annoying. Just trying to parse that, like parsing this intersection. Not having to do this. Okay, so we'll go back to the testing grounds. This is our snow utility. I can plug this into it. And that looks real cool. So there's still some features that are working, but we gotta get the snow to be thicker, cover things up a little bit better. So, go back in here. So we have this height map, and we go on levels. Here, we blur it a bit. Do some more blur. Get the facing normal. Do a histogram scan on it. So this value needs to change for that snow level. So 0.17 is what we had. So these blurs would be lower at first. So that non-uniform blur is going to be really low. And then we're going to get snow over everything. And then the snow will build up, and then we'll start to get to the point where the snow is falling off. And then we'll have to increase that blur. So let's get that snow level float. And then we're just going to lerp with it between 0 and what we had at the end, which was 5. So, like no snow, add some snow. Whoa! Spikes. So each of those snow sections is getting like a lot of height map. And that's because we changed this height value here, I think. Yeah, this. And that's just linear, I believe, essentially. So what we need to change is this as well. Which is how much we're blending it on top of the base height. And let's go between 0 and 1. Actually, we could just do this. Because our snow level goes between 0. So, if we're going to tune this, I'm going to call this kind of look snow level 0.5. I mean, we're never going to be able to build up like 18 inches of snow on our stuff in 3D without displacement. So if we look at something a little bit flatter, like this I'm going to say is snow level 1, where everything starts to be connected and we have a layer of snow over everything. Something like this, where we have those edges falling off, but the pieces aren't connected unless they're on a similar level. That's going to be 0.5. We still kind of have these shadows, and things kind of need to be on the same plane to kind of connect. So the snow falls evenly. We have all the snow coming down, sticking on the surface, and then we have snow collapsing. So it's hitting the surface and sticking as best as it can, and then it's collapsing into that shadow. So that shadow spot is kind of growing a little bit faster because it's getting the snow that's hitting here and then falling off. So we kind of start to have this like bridging that happens up onto the side edges. So even though it's kind of even at first, as you get more and it's no longer able to just stick to the surface, it's sticking to the snow and falling, then we start to get those bridges, and then that kind of fills in. So we need our like first stage snow dusting, and it's going to be semi-even, like you have kind of like pre-wetness and whether that's going to melt the snow, the temperature of the surface, how well it conducts heat. We're not really going to think about that. We're just going to kind of dust it. And then we'll move on to stage 2, which is covering, and then stage 3, which is like the filling stages. So base height map, base normal map, cover it with white. That's stage 1. So essentially what we're doing is just covering this. And that's basically a histogram scan. So we're just going to move through this. Until we get to 0.75 probably, because that's going to be where we start to run into those angles that are going to cause collapse, where it's too steep for the snow. So once there's a layer of snow, the snow is no longer sticking to the rock underneath, in this case. It's sticking to the snow that's on top, and then that friction connection surface area is a lot less because the snowflakes, they're kind of hanging on each other with their little kind of brushy snowflakey bits. That's kind of the connection. So until the snow gets packed and those get interlocked, the snow will just kind of fall off. So stage 1 of snow mask is this. It's snow level. Where do we want the breakpoints? 0.33? No. Probably 0.25, 0.5, 0.7. Yeah, probably at 25%. So we're going to replace our snow mask, this, and then we're going to have to change this like height effect. But whatever. Okay, so histogram scan is going between 0.666 and 0. I wish I could remember the remap range stuff that I made. So the value is between 0 and 1. And the base max is it's either that or switched, I can't remember. I believe this will map it to a 0 to 1 range. And then I'd need to multiply it. Okay. And then we gotta clamp it between this and this. So at 0.25 of the snow level, it reaches the max. So we're snowing. Surface is getting white, getting shiny and sparkly. Sweet. We're able to stick to a wider angle range. And then we shouldn't see any change above this currently. We will see blurring and then we'll see it get taller, but cool. I'm going to start running into the other effects that we do where we're like flattening stuff, but the mask won't change. Cool. Okay, so this is stage 1. This is stage 2 is this part. So we're basically going to be hitting a breakpoint where we switch to new maskness. So we're going to keep this at 0.25. And then our histogram scanning, what was this at? This was at like 1.6. So this value matters quite a bit. How much we pre-blur the input height. Is that in the previous one, that's what we wanted. Where we have a lot of high contrast. So I'm wondering if instead of the height map, we would use this map. Alright, so we got to kind of do the same thing with this blur with the remap range. So we have our snow level coming in. The minimum is 0.25. Whoa, 0.25. And then the max is 0.5. And then we want it to go between 0 and 1. I'm seeing if these need to be kind of combined. Because this is a lot more like lumpy and wavy. Which one, Punk? Which single node? Any of the ones that have a function in? Oh yeah. I haven't dug into theirs because I don't want any spoilers. But we could. They just use a white noise to make their snow? Sure. And then they turn that into a normals. Blur, auto levels, blur. Yep. I just got a little bit more going on. Which is why I'm making my own, because I don't think theirs looks very good. Okay, so part of it is that the height map is too high. So that's definitely affecting it. Height map, height map, height map. This. So the facing normal is super helpful. It's what I want. But I'm wondering if this blur is too much. That's the thing that I could probably expose. Oh! It's like a height contrast control. So what I'm kind of looking at is the curvature a little bit. If that curvature in the area is really high, then you want to blur it more. And if it's not, then don't. But it's also just the base facing normal, because that's basically how steep it is, which is here. It's like a pixel processor type of thing where I want to like look at this pixel and then decide how much blur I want. But I can't necessarily do that. But what I could do, since it's a non-uniform blur, is blend something in, like the facing normal. I want more blur where it's steeper, so then I would subtract. We had something similar to this before. And then get the new facing normal. Okay, not that. The reason I don't think the curvature will do what I want is because Curvature is basically the white areas where it's kind of bending down, it's convex, and the black areas where it's concave. So the curvature, if it's a perfectly like kind of normal angle, there's no curvature in the space between the convex and the concave part. It's just kind of a straight, non-curved place. The same way that if it was totally flat, it would have no curvature. So in order to get that steep angle, I kind of have to like select the black and the white, and then that's essentially what the facing angle does. So if I do curvature smooth, and then I basically say ooh, that's cool. The black is white, the white is white, and medium gray is 0. Then that, yeah. Facing angle is kind of inverted of this though. So, this. Hey. So these are really similar, but you'll notice that the space, whoa, the space in between this line right here is white, because that's a slope that is uniform along it, but we have no like knowing of the steepness. Here it's dark because that's the area that's steep, because it's facing mostly away in the normal. And I need that information rather than just the edges, this edge and this edge. I need that space as well. So that's why I didn't use curvature. I may go back to it, I may figure out a way to make it work, but what I really want is that like the whole slope information, areas that are really steep. So we have this facing normal versus this one, which are really freaking similar. So it's probably just histogram scanning at semi-high contrast from that 0.66. So for the high snow level, where it starts to like basically drop off, and we start to like add the snow, but then it starts collapsing, it's just gonna go all the way up to 1. So it seems pretty logical. We could try pulling this out, working on that. In this case, Okay. Okay, okay. So this one will basically take off from where this one ended. And then we'll increase the height. So basically we get the dusting, and where the snow is basically the same, and then we'll increase the height, and as we do that we're going to get this rounding happening. So it'll start off exactly the same, and then it'll build up, and then we'll start to transition to that rounding collapsing that happens. So we need to remap our range, because that happens at 0.25 in our snow level. So the minimum is 0.25. It's going to 1, so I don't know if we would need to remap the range. At 0.25 it's 0.6, and then it goes to 1. Now we need to remap the range, because otherwise it'll go above 1. Not that that really matters, but exactly what that. And this, we could expose and replace these if we wanted and use it. A remap. Okay, so 0.25. 0.333. 0.5. 1. Hey! I don't even know if we actually need to switch, because the other stuff kind of works. Wait a sec. Does this whole thing just work? I guess I would need to remap it. 0 and 0. My gut says it won't. Yeah, that's a little weird. It doesn't feel as much like the snow accumulating as the other one. Okay, so then it's these two, and then it is going to transition between these for a very small window. Actually, so we're going to say that the min is actually So if our snow level is lower or equal to 0.25, then this is going to be the thing we're seeing. Our opacity is going to be 1. Otherwise, we're going to be transitioning between 1 and 0 across the 0.5 to 0.66 range. So if it's not, then we're going to remap this range with our min at I might need to switch the inputs, but the min is 0.25, the max is 0.5, the max is 0 and 1. Okay, 0. So then we add some snow. We'll have to, of course, change the height map and the blending level, but add some snow, covering the surface. Then we get to 0.24, 0.25, 0.26. Okay, it's just flopping over, so we don't want that. We want like a 1 minus. Okay, so 0.25, 0.26. It should basically stay the same. Okay, that transition needs to be a lot shorter. So something like 0.233, 4 threes. And then this is going to be between okay, 2.5, 2.6, 7. Those edges are rounding over a little bit. The overall surface is smoothing. Now we're into round and smooth over surface territory. Everything is smooth to heck over. This is kind of where things are filling in. Alright, so we need to get the high map to be changing a little bit more, which is this one. Painted some weird stuff in here. So basically giving it the max value of the height map. Because then we crunch the levels so that we can get back up to the overall height. So this is the minimum. And we'll just do a remap, I think. Although it does need like a fairly slow takeoff. So probably a POW. So the max value that we can go to is this. And I mean, I guess we can start at 0, where the snow is just kind of sticking on the surface and it's starting to change the color, but it's not actually doing enough to change the height. And then it is going to go between 0 and whatever this is. Then our base max is I guess this is just a linear interpolation, thinking about it. It goes between 0 and the max based on this curve. Let's see. Is PAL the right? Yeah, because if I like square 0.5, it's 0.25. It's just weird that it's at 0.45, it's max right now. Like, does it go higher? No, it just smooths it out. So snow level is 0.05. 0.05 times 0.05 is 0.002. So I should be like really close to this. 1 minus the max. The max is like 0.87 or whatever. So then it's 0.13 plus, so the max should be 0.6 something. Going by 5. 0, between 0 and this. Why is the height so high? Snow level is 0.05, which means that it's really close to 0, which means that 0 should be my A. I'm so confused. Snow level. Oh, probably because I switched them. Snow level to the 5th. It's basically this. Okay. Okay, so 0.4 is where we're starting to add snow, which means that this needs to be brought down. Maybe it's just a linear. Getting closer. So I don't like how much this is adding to the height map. So then I think, okay, well, it needs to start off more slowly. So we'll square it. So then we start to see a little accumulation. But really, I don't know if the height probably shouldn't be changing until 0.25. So we need to do a remap. Like the snow level. Have a remap. Okay, 0.5. So at 2.5, it starts to add to the height. I'm making sure all the masks and everything are transitioning the way that I expect them to. Okay, cool. I think that's behaving pretty well. Like in these low values, you get this nice dusting. It's not really changing the height too much. Rather, it's not at all. It might tick off a little too fast in the height adding part. The height adding might just be too much. Really, I think that's what it is. So really the number that we're going between it is 0 and then max. And then this levels, we don't care about doing a relevel on it. Oh wait, we do. It would be this. To adjust the surface. And at 1, we're basically flat. So the amount of height that we're allowed to add with the snow is equal to the disparity between the highest and the lowest. Sorry, highest and 1. So the max is 0.86247, so we're allowed to play with 0.13753 a value to put on top of the snow to basically fill it up to 1. So the next part is the snow melt. Taking the snow that's there and melting it back, which is tricky, I'm guessing. Basically, we're going to take this mask, do stuff to it. When the snow melts, it melts first on the things that are facing the sun, and I guess facing the sun for the majority of the day, that have the thinnest amount of snow, which are generally vertical surfaces. What else, guys? What are the parameters of snowmelt? So vertical surfaces don't have as much snow on them to begin with. Surfaces facing the sun, surfaces that are better conductors of heat. Just looking at the reference, this snowmelt one. The wetness is going to move down in angle and gravity. You can see here that this just has a little edge, and this has a lot more than like here. So we have this. And we basically let's take this. Blur it with itself. Done. Perfect snow melt. It's probably a histogram scan on this as well. Cover most of the thing with snow. Yeah, and then snow melt. There's a little bit of like edgeness. Like the edges are kind of round. And then I think this is where curvature would actually be really useful, because the positive curvature, negative curvature areas are probably gonna melt faster. Let me see. Okay, so the positive, the white areas of the curvature map are the convex ones. So that's a space where the snow is on kind of a tighter edge, and it's going to want to like kind of recede or pull away as that area heats up. The snow is going to want to kind of pull back from that area. And then the concave areas, the snow is going to want to stay there. So as part of this snow melt for a auto levels in here, probably want to do an overlay. So that way the dark areas kind of get a little darker. These areas here. The snow would kind of want to stay. And then we blur it to create that transition line. The snow kind of goes smooth when it melts. So another dimension would be ambient occlusion, which is like how well that light can get in there. So then we probably want to bring our AO input in here as well. Do a overlay. Maybe we just do all of that for this. So the AO and curvature are kind of creating a cavity map. This would be a cavity map. So we overlay them so that we kind of get the areas that are exposed and curved. So then we can overlay that on top of our kind of facing normal, so that sides that are really vertical, those are going to melt really quick. There's not a lot of snow, there's not a lot keeping it there, so like as it melts and there's less surface tension, less friction there, it's going to drop off. So then we kind of blur it with itself to just help kind of smooth some of these harder transitions here. Smooth those out a bit, auto levels, so that we get our little bit higher contrast, and then histogram scan it and blur it a bit so that we get our rounded edges. So then we up our snow melts a little bit more. Get more snow melt. Like the contrast probably needs to be relatively high. So what's not working very well is the kind of slope drainage component, making it so that the higher surfaces get hit first. Bring our height map in. So just trying to kind of think through the dimensions here. So we have the height map, so all the higher surfaces going all the way to the lower surfaces. Bring the angle in on top of that, which is this basically. We want to I didn't invert it. Let's try not inverting it. So then facing angle, you do a multiply. So that's going to kind of knock those slopes down. A little extra. And then overlay all this on top of that. So we have our cracks. And then we blur it a bit. Auto levels is probably not going to do anything at this point. And our histogram scan. And so this should probably be in multiply mode now. Okay. Oh. That histogram scan. You have to invert it basically, because histogram scan is going to go through, grab all the light values. So you need to invert that slider basically. So if our snow melt is really high, it's weird that it's hanging out on all those high areas, which means that we need to kind of switch how this is working. So really we need to kind of start with AO. And then overlay curvature on top of that. and then overlay height on top of that. So that it melts off these surfaces first. And if we didn't do 1 minus, and it was subtract, we have almost no snow. Our melt is really high, that's good. That's what we want. Snow melt is lower. Okay, I don't really like how it's staying on the slopes. So the slopes need to okay. So we're doing a histogram scan. So the high points will get hit first. That's what we want. So, and then we'd want this to be like divide. So the high points, the edges, so all these dark areas, snow will stick around in. Smooth out the features a little bit. Histogram scan. Okay. Talk it out. Talk to yourselves. Just awesome when you're working at home by yourself. You don't have anybody looking at you like you're crazy. Except you guys, maybe. No snowmelt. Didn't put anything in here, right? Okay, good. Blur is kind of nice, but it's also... So what it's doing is it's helping like the transition space a little bit, especially with the super high snow level. But definitely doesn't feel correct. I think I'll use it for something else. I'll use it for the wetness component. This probably just needs to be a pretty low value just so it drops off a little bit. Yeah, see, like this line here. So we need to bring that wetness utility in so that we can wet the rocks and stuff. I don't need to worry about metalness. Probably don't need to adjust the height because I'm not going to, well, maybe. I was going to say, I'm probably not going to be putting puddles in, but why not? So the wetness is going to be basically a blurred version of the melt. Like another blurred version. Blur, blur, blur. And then we're going to take the facing angle, to divide. Oh wait, I wonder if shadows work. This just takes the height map. multiply. Let's go the other way. There we go. Okay. So then invert. This is where the wetness is. But we need to take out where the snow is, because that's awkward. Because with the wet snow, it just doesn't look good. It doesn't behave the same as other things. So then we're wetting the areas around the snow. That's the black is where the snow is. And then I want to take the snow or wetness out of the slopes and then blur it. Yeah. That's switched. Blur it and then take it out of the slopes. No, that's not true. Want the slopes that are based on the height map. So the snow is going to melt, and that's going to create a little bit of a wetness ring, and then like a tail of drip down the rock. So basically want to have like where the wetness at, slope blur with the height map. Okay. Yeah. Although, doesn't really look like. Let's doing any of this stuff. Okay, yeah, that's working. Just gotta make sure it gets the shine. Okay. Last thing is up in this. So we're gonna do no snow melt. It's a snowy sphere. You can fill it up with snow. We get this nice sparkly edge. Let's change our camera. Enable post effects. No glare because I hate that. Okay. So I'm gonna fill it up. Make it real smooth. Lower that snow level. Melt the snow. Increase the snow level. Really, we might do something differently. Based on the snow level, maybe the blur, I think would be a reasonable thing to do. So this non-uniform blur, we have a value in here. If we crank that up, it works in the higher snow levels. So it kind of feels like it's melting a little bit more. But on the low snow levels, it just gets kind of ghosty, which is not really what we want. So like that doesn't look very good. You could try getting crazy and do snow level. Some multiplier. And then we need to choose the max because we found out that non-uniform blur totally breaks at 0. So Ariston, what's going on? Ba, ba. So then it's less blurry. Tiny bit of snowmelt does look a little bit weird with the snow level like pretty high. Like really should be basically height map. If I just took this. Okay, so that blur, ghostiness. Wait, why is that so ghosty? It's weird that it's ghosty like that. When I say ghosty, I just mean like this 50% snow or whatever. Is that my contrast in here? Yeah, that's what it is. We get the ghostiness from the blur afterward. We don't need ghostiness in there to begin with. I'm hesitant about going too high. It's not too bad. Okay. 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 I think I'm close to being done for today, but I think the next The next thing to work on with this to get it to like behave the way that I think snow should and would be having the snow melt actually affect where we've said that there is more snow. So this is in subtract mode, but it's almost like the histogram scan isn't the right tool. It's waiting to see a histogram scanned afterward. I'm not sure, but so we have, for example, more snow on the top surfaces and in some of the concavity. So then when the snow melts, those need to be affected more realistically based on that relationship. Whoa, cannot type. I have this light utility that might be useful. So this allows me to light the surface. This might be a better way to do kind of a light-based melting. Because I want this, like, if a surface comes down and the snow comes against it, like what we have right here, and the snow is kind of filling that up, I want the snow to kind of blend out into this and just kind of roll into this protected space. Currently it goes whip and just falls over the edge down into it. Like, I want the snow like filling in this space. Like this, that. It's like this really formless shape, as opposed to what we have through all this. Like we've kind of thought through all the different stages. So we kind of hit this breaking point where the snow starts to build up, starts to fill in those edges. Those edges round over. We did that like edge collapsing stuff. The surface is covered. It's all smoothing over. Goes into this like nice snowball. But then when we start to melt it, kind of just get this really weird behavior. Right? It really needs to affect the height map in a better way than it does currently. We know how much snow is on the surface because we're using that max node to basically say the snow is allowed to go from the highest peak all the way up. So for the lower areas, they're going to have more snow because they're, let's say, this far below. So the highest peak can go this far to get to 1. The lowest valley can go all the way up to here. So then when we melt the snow, this should show up first, and we should kind of be like just bringing the snow level down while affecting the different sides and slopes more or less based on kind of what we know about the way that snow melts in sun direction and stuff. But we don't have that. We're just kind of showing the peaks, and then the snow level stays at what it is. So there needs to be a better balance. I think the height map probably needs to be affected. So this is our height map. We need to be doing some stuff kind of in here to adjust that height map so that it feels like the snow is kind of receding back into the surface with the snow melt. We don't have any of that. So I'm going to save for now. The wetness stuff is working. You can see this wetness area, but I think part of like just the bad shape that we have is partially to blame for the wetness really not reading. And then it's adding frost and freezy water to it. So fingers crossed for next week, next Sunday. I appreciate you all tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.